All right. Good evening, everyone. It is Tuesday, someday in April. I've lost the date. The 20th. Yay, it's the 20th of April. So we're going to go ahead and get started with our Avon Grove Charter School board working session. And we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance, if everyone will just recite it after me. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. And if everyone would recite the mission statement: to inspire passion for lifelong learning, one student at a time. Thank you very much. Sarah, are you doing roll call?
Sure.
Thank you.
Joanne Degler.
Here.
Eugene Steger.
No.
Stacy Barno.
Here.
Robert Renier.
Here.
Colleen Preston.
No.
Deji Akintoy.
Here.
Brian Ladman.
Here.
Kristen Smith.
No.
And Michelle McCrae.
Here.
Well, thank you, everybody. It's good to see everybody on a beautiful 75-degree day. Brian, any comments for this meeting? I would assume not.
Not for the working session.
Thank you very much. Nothing for the Board of Trustees, so we'll go ahead and move on to Head of School for the 2021 to 2022 online learning option.
All right, well, we're going to jump into our learning options. Brian has some slides that he shared at the Strategic Planning Committee meeting. So he's going to go over them, and then some of the Strategic Planning Committee meeting feedback and notes from the group.
So we put out, when we surveyed families in the beginning of March, when they were making the learning transition for this final quarter, asking them at that particular time what they believed their interest would be in a virtual learning option for the 21-22 school year. So we were trying to gather some interest data to see how many students per grade level or across divisions this was going to be. And this was, again, sort of at the height of some of our case counts, but also when we were trying to get under that 100 incident rate so that we could start to return students to more in-person schooling. So this was the breakdown of those who had said that they were interested. So this wasn't a commitment. This was just, is this something that you're thinking about? And you can see it by grade level. That's their grade level this year. So you would, +1 the grade level to think about that many kids may potentially be interested in a remote learning option, a full-time remote learning option for the fall and for the 21-22 school year. And with these numbers, as an administrative team, we kind of said that this doesn't necessitate or really or the volume for each grade level wouldn't really be, we wouldn't be able to support that with our own staff and sort of build our own full-time online learning program for nine kindergartners going into first grade. So the numbers weren't really there. And it's an economy of scale thing. You have some of the bigger districts, right, who have many, many more elementary school students across their district, who are building models like that, whether it's for COVID-related issue or if it's to compete with cyber charter school programs and to keep students within their district. They have more numbers. But for us to dedicate a teacher to 9 students in a fully online model, it's difficult for us to manage from a human capital side and from a money side of things.
So Brian, can I just ask, so when you say for grade 0 kindergarten, 9 students, that is the full response was out of the whole kindergarten, or what was the percent that responded?
So this was a question on their learning intentions. So it was almost 100%.
Okay, great.
This
so
was where we were calling
people.
families. Do you want to come back to in-person learning for the fourth quarter? And by the way, what's your intent to return for the 21-22 school year? And what are you thinking about in terms of your learning modality for next year? So we were right around 100% of respondents.
All right.
And
so it's a
Dwayne, just
total
so
of
you
9
know-
students.
Yeah,
Or
and
I'm sorry. Yeah, go ahead.
that's all right. And just so you know, I had a conversation with some parents that are doing online learning the entire school year. And some of them said they put in that they were interested in remote learning for the 21-22, so they could be one of those 9, but they had indicated that their intention is to go back to school. So some of that information might change even. So their 9 might go down to 5 for September if numbers change or vaccinations change people's interpretation of what they want to do next year. So that's not a firm number even. It could be less.
That's
And-
okay.
and-
What I was trying to get at is, and make sure, so approximately 120 some total students over the whole entire student body
Exactly.
interested. Okay, that makes
Correct.
sense. Thank you.
And the models change, right, as you go through. So, you have self-contained elementary school classrooms. And then once you get to 7th grade and you're switching teachers, one online student needs 6 different teachers in our school model. Or if you're a high school student, you need a math teacher, an English teacher. It's not a universal just K-6 certification who can teach all subjects. So certifications get into play as we get into the higher grade levels. So, looking at that information, we tried to come up with, and we spent a lot of time talking about this of, what are our options, knowing that there are some families who, in March had said that they may be interested in continuing in that learning mode or that environment for next year. So option 1 is almost like a no option. So it would be that based on those numbers, and based on our lottery that's coming in, that unless it was dictated that we had to offer something by the Department of Education because something happens over the summer in which that's COVID related, in which we're mandated to do something like this, that we would not offer a full-time remote learning option for next school year. And that, you're kind of looking at from the perspective of we're a brick and mortar charter school, and we sort of remain true to we're a brick and mortar charter school and we offer in-person learning. We're not big enough to house a standalone and separate virtual program. And that if a family is truly interested in that learning mode, that we set them up and coordinate trying to have them involved with a cyber charter school program that has been doing that and has mastered that sort of that environment. And that we would still utilize online courses in our upper school, just like we do now, to sort of ad hoc fill needs, whether it's we don't have an AGCS teacher for a particular subject area, or courses cannot fit into a student's schedule, or for academic acceleration. And we've been talking in the strategic planning committee and as an administration of even how do we expand some of our secondary course offerings in the future by offering some additional online courses within our course catalog for our high school students. So again, that would be, we are what we are, and we stay true to that. And we tried to coordinate with those families to set them up with a cyber charter school program to meet their needs. The other option would be that we sort of build a 1-year program for these families where they would enroll full-time for the entire year. So they wouldn't have the option to switch back. And it would be you're choosing virtual learning for the entire school year. And that does present a potential budget constraint if we are building an asynchronous program, contracting with third-party vendors for curriculum and for teachers, and that student is in that student brings a cost to that program if we were not to backfill their in-person seat. So that could have a budget constraint. If we were to backfill that student's in-person seat, then we would also have to very carefully watch our enrollment as we're going into the 22-23 school year, because we could potentially have those online students returning, but we already kind of filled their in-person seat from a budget standpoint and capacity standpoint in the building. But if we offered this option that students would retain their in-person seat, so they could come back in the 22-23 school year, but it would just be a 1-year option, and it would be really related to health and safety concerns. And we'd be very upfront with families. This is for 1 year after this. If you want to continue online learning, or online learning is really what you think right now your child's going to do for the next 5, 6, 10 years, because it really worked for your family, we really suggest that you partner with the cyber charter school program that does this well. This program, because we already said we don't have the numbers to be able to house this to do it in-house, it'd be predominantly asynchronous and independent learning. That would be from kindergarten all the way through 12th grade. The classes are virtually asynchronous and independent learning. There's not a ton of teacher support. There is teacher support, but not a lot of teacher support. They're not getting 90 minutes. Elementary students would not be getting 90 minutes of ELA and math instruction, direct instruction with a teacher every day. For primary and elementary grade levels, the parents take on more of the burden of being the quote unquote teacher for those students. Because we would be contracting out, the curriculum and instruction and support would be provided by a third-party vendor, and we would not run or manage it. We're basically outsourcing this program for a year. The curriculum would not be 100% consistent with what our students are receiving in person at AGCS. However, it would all be aligned to grade level and content standards. Those students could still participate in extracurricular activities and athletics and things. We would still try to find ways to integrate them back into our school community as much as possible, with anticipating that they would be returning to in-person learning in the following school year. We would have to develop an internet reimbursement policy for these kids to make sure that they're set up with, and we did that even with like hotspot needs and things like that. So we want to make sure that they have access. They could continue to participate in our BYOD program. But again, I would reiterate, if a family believes that they think that this is the learning mode that their child is going to be successful in for subsequent years, that they would partner with a full-time cyber program that is much more robust and engaging and has a lot more supports than what we would offer through a third-party vendor for this single school year. So we talked a lot about this. As an administrative team, it got brought up at the strategic planning committee. So wanted to bring it to all of you for open discussion. I don't know if this is necessarily something that the board needs to vote upon, but just looking for feedback as a governing body on where you think the school's best route would be. And then I did put at the bottom that the strategic planning committee's recommendation was to stay true to our model, and not offer something like this next year unless we were mandated to, either through the legislature or through the Department of Ed.
Just to give you some perspective of what the admin team thought in the beginning, we were about looking at the same thing the strategic planning committee recommended. And then we thought, based on people's comfort level, we've always been really flexible and trying to accommodate for, what our community needed. And so that's when we came up with option 2. But understandably, if this is something that they want to continue, parents want to continue with their kids, this option might weigh on us in all the ways that Brian described. So I don't think this is a cut and dry, the strategic planning committee recommends this. We really do want the board's feedback because, we were on the fence about both options and what we thought our community most needed. And that means our teachers, our administrative staff, along with our parents, what was the fairest way to handle going into the 21-22 school year. So I do hope there's some discussion around what you think the best option is for AGCS.
There are a lot of other things that go into option 2. When we contract with a third-party vendor, we lose a lot of control. So, I deal with it with high school classes now. It's very hard for me to intervene when a parent might not be happy, or a student is struggling with something, or a technical issue, because it's all contracted out and outsourced. I don't have a lot of control over it. And my answer typically is there's nothing I can really do. So there are difficulties and a loss of control when we go that option. But we tried to come up with something that would offer, like Mrs. Bishop said, but understanding that, the numbers weren't here for us to be able to devote staff space and resources to adequately serve that.
Brian, Stacy has a question.
I just wanted to share, Colleen and I both sit on that committee. So the committee, just for the board and the community, is made up of teachers, administration, and board members. So it has a good group of people to provide feedback. It's a pretty large group. I think some of the questions we talked about are some of the pieces where the financial implications, if more than a certain number of students would like to do this option, could we sustain that for the 1 year? And it's just so hard trying to predict how many people would want it, because you would need to be able to offer it to whoever would like that option. So that was one of the discussion points. And I think just, again, could we offer this with a clear understanding that everyone understood it was just a 1 year option? And was that really looking forward to that? So that was some of the discussion. But I just wanted to share with the rest of the group and just the community of that. There's a lot of feedback from different parties on that group, which I think is excellent, because I think it helps to really support what strategic planning looks at from all perspectives. So I just wanted to share that.
Agreed. Thanks, Stacy.
Michelle. Oh, hold
Just
on,
a
Rob.
quick
I got you.
question. Do we know if other local schools are looking at these type of scenarios too?
They are, and a lot of the other schools are looking at outsourcing, like Brian's describing in option 2, or building their own programs. I know, like Westchester School District during COVID was already in the plan of making a cyber portion of their school. So there's a cyber academy at Westchester. And so those kids would just pick that option for next year. But what they're not allowing them to do is flop back and forth. So you can't join Westchester Cyber Academy and then decide you want to go back to school because, they've said there's, COVID, everybody's vaccinated, right? They're not going to allow you to do that. Once you pick a situation, a cyber academy or a in-person, that's what you have to do the full year. So the only way I think schools would go back is if there was a emergency like there was a year ago, and no one's anticipating that for next year. So, and like Brian said, those numbers are heavier because they have more kids in the district. So they're able to sustain one teacher maybe for that grade level. Now, I do, when we're talking about this as an admin team, I know the financial impact for 9 kids is one thing, but if you get 9 kids and then you fill a class with the normal number and take kids off the waiting list, that helps the budget. That's not a budget, that doesn't hurt the budget. The problem is then you have all of these kids the following year, and if they don't leave, then you have a bubble that you have to then sustain teachers in space that we don't have. And we've done that problem before too, where we decide to add a class and then we have nowhere to put them because we don't have space. So you then cause other problems too. So there's a lot that goes into both options that for the future could help or hurt depending on how you look at it.
I think there's a model difference too that we've talked about, I think, at the strategic planning, where if I'm a student in a school district and I want to, it's what they run into now, and I want to have go to a cyber program. If the district doesn't offer it, I'm going to go look somewhere else. I'm going to go to a cyber school, and I'm going to leave that district. But nobody's moving into my house to then be able to then fill my space in a school district. Where we are at, and it's just a reality of our model. If we have a student leave, we are able to have an open lottery where we can have more students come in. Where a district doesn't have that, they have to program it for being able to keep students within their school district for financial reasons.
Rob, you had a question?
Yeah, so I appreciate you guys putting all the thought into option 2. It seems to me that option 2 is going to be very, very hard to manage. So So my opinion on this is we stick, because we're a brick and mortar school. My opinion would be that we stick with our thing, and those 9 or 10 per grade level. If they decide not to come back in person, they leave, we fill those spots permanently. Because if we bring kids in to fill for a year and those kids are still here, we have a whole nother issue going into next year. We stay true to our core, and we stay that way. And if we lose some, we lose some, but we're able to backfill them, like you just said, Brian. So that's just my opinion.
Rob, I think that's a great point. I'm in agreement with you. I think also if you look at option 2, the justice that we will do the student is not the same as option 1, because if we're farming this out to a third party and we have no control, and not to mention if after the first year they say, "Oh, I want to come in, I want to come back to brick and mortar," we're not giving that student what they deserve and how they should be able to learn through AGCS. So I agree. I think number 1 has to be our option. Number 2 just looks a little too treacherous for me, for everything, all the negatives against it.
Thank you.
Anyone else have a question or comment? No. Sarah, would you do me a favor and mark Eugene and Colleen present? Thank you. Eugene, did you have a question? You unmiked?
No, I concur with you, Dwayne. I think option 1, that's the core of our school, because we are one of the few bricks and mortar charter schools. I think our responsibility is going back to our core.
Yep.
Mhm.
Thank you. Anyone else? Great. Thank you. Do you want to move on to the policy review? There it is. We got
Yeah,
it.
Brian's going to talk about the graduation. Now, we've talked about this in the past, but we're going to be asking for approval. So we just wanted to review what you're approving with the graduation requirements.
So we talked about this at the board meeting, I think a month ago, or maybe 2 months ago. It was brought up at strategic planning again. But I said I would gather some data, because I believe somebody asked, like, how much is this? Who's this? How many kids is this going to impact? So the policy that was is coming up is the graduation requirements policy. We had talked about how we had a provision in there about accelerated high school classes taken in middle school. So grades 7 and 8 would show on students' transcripts, and we were running into some issues prior, but running into issues now because some of our students who historically have done very well may not be doing well this year. And we started getting requests about not wanting those courses to show on their transcripts. They don't count towards, meeting graduation requirements. But the families were basically like, I don't want a poor grade on my from 7th grade being on my student's high school transcript that they're not really, that 7th grader may not be thinking about, because that's 6 years away. So we had made the recommendation that we remove this provision and sort of build out a timeline of different graduation requirements, so that we can eliminate this in the future. So I went through and I tried to identify the number of students that this is going to affect. So right now in the 2020-2021 school year, we have 58 8th graders that are currently taking either a high school level math or high school level language class. We have 24 7th graders who are taking a high school level math class, and 6 6th graders. And the 6th graders, I just put that there. This policy didn't technically apply to them because it said during a middle school years, which we say is 7th and 8th grade. But I just wanted to put the 6th graders in there because they are taking high school level math classes. And we had said that if this policy were to pass, and we were going to look to try to give our 8th graders an option so that they could say, yes, I want the classes on because my kid is doing well this year, or no, I don't want it on. And if the 8th grader said they didn't want it on, then we would actually have to go back and remove potentially classes that they took in 7th grade. So that's that historical grades portion of our current 8th graders. There's 17 of them that have a previous course. And then there's 3 7th graders that have a previous course. Again, the 7th graders, it doesn't necessarily affect, but I put it on there just so that we had some context of the numbers. This is where our grade distribution was, and we went over this at strategic planning to try to just talk about where some of our students are at that are in 8th grade taking high school level classes, and how they historically have been high achieving students. They're coming up into the high school program to take those classes, and where their grade distribution is at, particularly Algebra 1. So we were talking about what the potential volume would be of students that are not necessarily doing as well as they might have historically done. And the conversations that we've had with parents, it's been COVID related issues. My child hasn't been in school at all, or the hybrid program, they're only in school 2 days a week and this just isn't enough in-person time, or they're having difficulty for, emotionally through all of this, and they're distracted and they're not doing as well as they previously had been. So with the policy change, this would sort of be the timeline of how things shook out for each graduating class. So for next year's seniors, policy stays the way it is, which was actually prior to the change for that we made back in 2019, which is the current as is policy. For the class of 2023 and 2024, we would apply the policy as it is now. So if they had, those are our current 9th and 10th graders. So if they had taken classes that were back in middle school, so either the previous year or 2 years ago, they already took those classes under the premise that they would be displayed on their transcript. Those final grades already been calculated. So that would stay as is. There's no change for those kids. For our current 8th graders, we would give them this year the option basically to opt in as the policy as it currently is. So you could have your current math class or your current high school level English class or language class display on your transcript. That will calculate into your GPA. That will go towards your cumulative credits. Won't go towards graduation requirements, but you can opt into the policy, or you can opt out. And so we're giving the 8th graders the choice. And they could have the high school classes taken while they were in middle school completely removed from their transcript, whether it was a class taken in 7th grade or a class taken this year in 8th grade. So an option for those ones. And then for our current 7th graders, the new policy that's coming up tonight would be applied. And that would be high school classes are the only thing that display on transcripts, the only thing that goes towards graduation requirements, and the only thing that calculates into a student's GPA, which is very traditional and what most school districts apply when looking at what students take in order to meet their graduation requirements. So that's kind of the timeline. Now that's kind of messy and something we're gonna have to stay on top of every school year to make sure that the students are aware of what their requirements are. But we wanted to, I think when we were talking before, it was let's try to find a way to give the 8th grade kids an option, and then make the application of the new policy to the 7th graders who probably, and we do talk about this and we message it, but probably are somewhat naive to this. This is still a really far way away. They might not even be aware that this type of policy applies to them, no matter how many times we might talk to them about it. So that's kind of that policy change in a nutshell, and just wanted to open it up to see if there were any additional questions before I had emailed it out with some lengthy emails to review before tonight's vote.
Any questions?
Comment.
No.
I think it's good that we're going back to the traditional.
Thank you, Eugene. All right. If there's no further questions, we can. All right. Well, that's everything for head of school. Brian or Kristen, nothing else. We'll move on to policies. We will jump down to Donna. Hello, Donna.
Hi, Dwayne. How are you? Hi, everyone. So for tonight, we have several policies for a review for approval based on the 30-day review that's been in place. And then we have 2 policies that we're looking for the board to approve rescinding. So they're available on board docs, and the policies in question or requiring action are several finance policies, the pupil allotment tuition income policy. It was a policy update for the cyclical review. Payment of bills, it was a replacement board docs policy. The finance policy, it was again a policy update for cyclical review. Student activity fund, it's a board docs policy. Taxable fringe benefits, board docs policy. Fiscal management fund balance with an attachment, it was up for cyclical review. Gifts and donations, it was a board docs policy, and the graduation requirements as explained by Brian. The two policies that we will be rescinding are the former AGCS payment of claims policy and the common trust policy. And with that, we still have a couple of finance in review, and then we will be moving over to work with Brian for future policy updates going forward. And that's all I have, Dwayne.
Thank you, Donna. That's a lot for tonight. Moving along, any other comments from school principals or directors?
Just two things. When Donna said we're moving into Brian's section, we're doing instructional policies next, and then we're going to hopefully get into special ed. So each director will take her turn with Stacy to update board docs. That's how we're doing each month, just to give some further clarification. Is this the time? Do you want to talk a little bit about the board retreat, just so that we're not taking up the board meeting?
Yeah, so there's a couple things that, and I'll mention them. The one on the board meeting, Kristen Smith and Rob Rainier have submitted their resignation for the end of this year. Both have a lot going on in their lives, and I can completely appreciate that. So we will be, I've asked Kristen, she's gone ahead, we're going to be submitting out for new board members. So if you know anyone, again, reach out to your friends, neighbors, if they'd like to join us. We will be looking for that committee. Michelle, you're still on, who's on HR? Remind me.
Nominations.
Michelle? Nominations and stuff. So we will get that going.
Michelle,
look forward to-
just so you know, Susan's aware. So Susan said we can follow the same process. So if you want to reach out, she has everything, ready to follow your lead to start that committee back up and going.
That's great. I'll reach out to her tomorrow.
And I think
Michelle, I'll help you if you would like me on that committee.
Thank
Kristen-
you, Gene. I appreciate
Kristen
it.
was on that committee, correct? Smith?
Dwayne,
Michelle?
yes, she was.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
So I'll reach out to you, Michelle. I'll join you.
Sounds
Moving along. So then the other thing is we are looking to do a board retreat. We'd like to do it. It would have been nice to have the whole board, but since it's going to break up a little bit, but it may be a good time. So Kristen, I asked her, she's going to send out a questionnaire, or actually Susan will, questionnaire of timing. And do we do a weekend? Do we do a couple nights in a row? Maybe one night every week for a month or something is something they've done before. So look for that so that we can all get together. I think it's a great time. One, to get to know each other better, reflect on what went right last year, because it was an amazing year. So, and everyone did a great job. So I'm looking forward to it.
Is there any other options, just to give Susan some direction, and Michelle and Rob? I know you've been to a couple retreats. Eugene, I think you've been to a couple. We've done the Saturday morning type of 9 to 3 day retreats. And we've also done the night, like 4 nights in 1 month. And we've done like a 6 to 9 type of thing. Is there any other options when she surveys the board, just to see what the best time is that you want in there, or stick with those two?
Stick with those two based upon, it gives flexibility because we all have busy lives. And some of us have commitments for both work and for family. And I think it gives us the option. And quite frankly, the ones over at the intermediate unit were phenomenal.
Okay.
Anybody else have any comments or thoughts? And we're going to plan it pretty far out so everyone can plan. All right. Anything else before we, I ask for a motion to, we're really ahead of time. This is great. If there's nothing else.
Do Dwayne, you're doing a great job.
I know. Let's keep us moving. Do we have a motion to adjourn this meeting?
I'll motion it's right.
I'll second.
Okay, first for Rob, second for Stacy. All in favor, nod. All right, and then we will see everyone back here for the board meeting in approximately 40 minutes. All right, we'll see you back here. Thank you.